Wow, thank you very much for that introduction. I feel a little bit like that famous story of the guy who said, rumors of my demise have been greatly exaggerated. I want to acknowledge, first of all, my collaborator in this work, James Fowler, and thank very much Provost Garza and Dr. Shore for inviting me. I'm going to be talking today about some of our current work on the spread of health behaviors within social networks. Now, more generally, my research group is interested in how it might be that illness or death or healthcare use or disability or health behaviors in one person might spread and cause illness or death or healthcare use or disability or health behaviors in other people to whom that initial person might be connected. A kind of non-biological spread or contagion of health-related phenomena. In a way, a strictly sociological explanation or understanding of disease and spreading processes within social networks. Now, I'm going to start today by speaking about this problem of obesity, but I'm also going to talk a little bit about smoking and eating behaviors, and then move on to discuss some emotional states and other health phenomena. For example, I am going to be speaking about the spread of happiness within social networks, showing you some results which we haven't yet published. Now, as I'm sure all of you know, the prevalence of obesity has increased dramatically in our society over just the last 10 years, from about 23 to 31%, and fully 2/3 of Americans are currently overweight. And it had become quite fashionable to speak about the epidemic of obesity. And about 4 or 5 years ago, we began to wonder whether this sort of locution, this way of speaking about obesity, was more than just metaphoric. So when we speak of an epidemic, one meaning of the term is that the prevalence of the condition exceeds the baseline rate. But of course, another obvious meaning of the word epidemic is that there's some kind of contagion, a spread from person to person. So we began to wonder, was it the case that there could be a kind of spread of obesity from person to person? And it didn't strain credulity that this might be the case, because people are embedded within social networks and are quite reasonably influenced by the actions and behaviors and appearance of other people around them. So if other people around them were gaining weight, it didn't strain credulity to us that they might also go on to gain weight. And I need to rush to add, because with all the publicity that our work got, some people misunderstood and thought that we were claiming that somehow we had found the cause of the obesity epidemic, which is not at all the case. Networks have this very interesting property, which is that they tend to augment or magnify whatever they're seeded with. And our explanation or our findings fit into a broader literature which looks at a host of other supra-individual determinants of weight gain in our society. These include obvious things like the way our cities have changed, the suburban sprawl, the decreasing and the extent to which that decreases the amount of calories that people burn, or other kinds of phenomena that increase the number of calories that people take into their bodies. Things like the declining real price of food across time, or increasing marketing efforts and the like. So there are a lot of structural reasons we are gaining weight as a society. It's clearly not a genetic phenomenon. Our genes have not changed over the last 30 years. And our explanation helps to understand this phenomena in part. Now, in order to study this phenomena, we had to assemble a certain kind of data. And this is a network picture. What's interesting to me about this is that if I had shown a similar audience as this picture 5 or 10 years ago, it might not have been so familiar, but now it's sort of entered pop culture. Most of you have probably seen network pictures, whether because you're on Facebook or whether you see them published, or with the recent brouhaha regarding the Major League Baseball, there was even a network maps that showed like which baseball player was injecting which other user or introducing them to drugs. Every dot here represents a person, is a node. And lines between dots represent ties between them. I'm going to adopt a convention here that I'll keep through the rest of the talk, which is the red perimeter dots are women and the blue perimeter dots are men. The arrows indicate direction of nomination. I say you are my friend, or you say I am your friend. That's a directional tie. Of course, if you're my sister, there's no directionality to that. We're related to each other, so the arrows would point both ways. And we can also vary the color of the arrow to indicate types of relationships. This shows 12,000 people in the Framingham Heart Study, followed over 30 years, beginning in 1970. And what we did is we wanted a source of data that had information about people's embeddedness in social networks and their social network ties, that also contained information about their weight and other outcomes, and that had this information at repeated cuts across time, every few years, let's say, over this large span of time. And we hit upon the idea of exploiting the Framingham Heart Study because we learned that in the basement of this very famous study, which has been ongoing for over 60 years, they had these paper records that the administrative staff at the Framingham Heart Study used to track the participants. So if you came in to be examined today and we needed to know where to find you in 4 years, they would record who are all your family, where do you live, where do you work, who's a close friend that will know where you are in 4 years, and so forth. And we computerized these records because we realized that by dumb luck, when you said that so-and-so is your friend or so-and-so you lived in such and such a place, that your friend or your neighbors might also be participants in the Framingham Heart Study. So we could go back and reconstruct the social network ties over a huge span of time in something that would otherwise, well, it cost us almost $1 million to do this, but it would have cost many, many millions, obviously, to do the study from scratch. And so we're interested in studying what it means for people's health that they're embedded in social networks of such complexity more generally. And as I've already mentioned, we have repeated information about these people every 4 years or so over 30 years. And we have all kinds of data about them available from physical examinations. They were examined by the doctors. They completed survey questionnaires, the test results, and the like. And I'm going to be particularly focusing on a core group of individuals within this data set who we're going to call, in network parlance, we're going to call them egos. And that's not because the study was done at Harvard. And these egos can be connected to other individuals who are in network parlance are called alters. Okay, so I'm the ego and you are my alter. Okay, and within this network of 12,000 people, we have 5,124 egos. Their mean age is 37 at cohort inception, although there's quite a large range, about half and half men and women. And they have the educational distribution and the health status distribution at baseline that's shown there. But we can study any and all connections of these individuals to the 12,000 people within the network, and on average, we have what is called a vertex degree, that is to say the number of ties at each node in the network that exceeds 10. So for each person, we have at least 10 ties, coworkers, friends, siblings, parents, children, neighbors, and the like. I'm sorry, not including neighbors. Neighbors explodes that number quite a bit. So we have an average of 10 ties within the network across time in this sample. Now, this is a slide of some of our most basic results. This shows obesity in the Framingham Heart Study Network in 2000. Again, the convention is that there are the nodes represent people, and we're going to make the node size proportional to people's BMI. So the fatter you are, the bigger the node. And then in addition to that, if your BMI is above 30, so you're sort of medically obese, we're going to color the node yellow as well. And we show the ties here are rendered in two different colors. The purple is friend or spousal ties, so non-genetic ties. And the orange is any kind of familial tie. So we're going to distinguish, let's say, between potential genetic relatedness between the two nodes that are being connected or non-genetic relatedness. And if you squint, you might see that there tends to be some clustering of obese and non-obese individuals in different regions of the network. So the question, though, is, first of all, because it's not obvious when you look at this picture that there is clustering, the question is, can you conclude that there is clustering? Is there, in fact, some clustering? Is there a mathematical summary, let's say, that you could use to say, oh, my God, yes, in this region of the network there is and there isn't clustering of obese and non-obese individuals? Second, if there is clustering, is it more than would be expected by chance alone? Because by dumb luck, there might be some clustering. Third, if there is more than expected by chance alone, how big are the clusters? What's the reach? Is it like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 degrees away? You know, is my obesity status related to the obesity status of my friends? Also my friends' friends, my friends' friends' friends. How far out does it go? How big are these clusters within the network? And finally, and perhaps most importantly, what causes the clustering? If, in fact, there's clustering and we've gotten as far as I've just described, can we understand the mechanism of the clustering? Now, one way to do this is to exploit some techniques that have been sort of invented by my colleague Laszlo Barabasi, who's a physicist, who is interested in studying networks of genes and networks of various kinds of biological phenomena. And so let me sort of walk you through how this works, because this is what's known as a permutation test, but it's easy to understand, and it's actually quite clever. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that we have a network, and 40% of the people in the network in the population are obese. If obesity were randomly distributed, if you started with one obese person and went out 1 degree removed, sort of the shell of the onion, so you just step away one person, this person's friends or relatives or whatever, in expectation, you would find that two